Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marsha Butler. I am the webinar director here at Advice Chaser, and we're so glad you're here to join us about this important topic. Before we introduce our guest and get started, I do need to do a bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars, such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you today's educational presentation. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box. The presenter will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number and email address as well. If we can't get to your question during today's event, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. I'd love to introduce you to our presenter today. Ellen DeLopp is an award-winning certified professional organizer and productivity consultant and is recognized for her contributions in the industry and community. She has extensive experience in working with ADHD individuals and holds certificates of study in ADHD and chronic disorganization, and is a member of the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. She works with families as a family manager coach. She is currently the past president of the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. She holds a bachelor's degree from Smith College and a master's degree in education from Boston College. Ellen's goal is to empower her clients by making a difference in their lives. Ellen, we're so glad to have you back, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Well, thank you, Marsha. I am so glad to be here with everybody, and I want to thank you all for prioritizing this time for us to chat. I'm excited, and I want to give you guys, kudos. You're starting early on something that is a rough patch for many people. So thank you for being with us. And, I just want to spend a few minutes before we even get started talking about the project itself, about how to approach a big project like this, because we know this is difficult. It causes a lot of anxiety. We get very nervous when we're talking about the IRS. We get nervous when we're talking about paperwork. So just want to give you a few heads up before we start about how to approach a big project like this so you can feel really comfortable doing it. First of all, I always talk about how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So this is the kind of thing that we want to take in small doses. In our industry, we call it chunking. So we want to break it into chunks that are much more manageable. And so today when we talk, we're going to not only talk about the pieces, how to break it into manageable pieces along the way, we're going to talk about other ways to make this easy, because we know the easier things are, the more likely we're going to do them. We also want to talk about setting aside some time blocks, another popular topic in the productivity industry right now. Time blocking means that we're going to set aside some specific times to work on this project so we don't have to do it all in the last minute and rush and feel like, did we do our best work? So those time blocks are really important. 2-hour time blocks, and starting probably the end of January when you start getting some materials in that are going to be part of your taxes. But right now, there's a time block that you can set up the organizational part of this project. So you could set aside an hour this weekend or next weekend to be ready to receive the materials you'll need for your taxes. And then I just want to talk a few minutes about how this makes us feel so anxious. And one of my best strategies when I feel anxious is to build a bigger team. And that build a bigger team comes from the professionals you surround yourself with, which is what this series is all about all the time, is who are the trusted professionals that are going to help us do our best work, that are going to bring the expertise and knowledge. And then as a result, we're going to feel really good about our ending our big project and turning it into the IRS on time. So just wanted to talk a few minutes about that before we took a deep dive into the materials we'll be needing. So as a professional organizer, I really want to encourage you to think about routines. Routines are ways that we not only chunk things, make things more small, we just also make them more automated. They're ways that we set up habits that reinforce the goals that we want to accomplish. And if our goal is to turn our taxes in on time, we want to be having routines that support that. So those routines also make life a lot easier because we don't have to think about all the steps. We just follow through with the routine that we've set up. And some of the best ways to start a new routine, which is a big New Year's resolution for many people, is to link that routine to something we're already doing. So if you can think about something that's already consistently going on for you that you're being successful at, it might be something like, when do I go get the mail? Because, you know, the first step is getting the mail into your house. Or if you're already being successful at that, your new routine might be, let me place it all in the same basket in the same place in my house. So a lot of the materials we're going to need are going to only come in the mail. And mail is often a big challenge for people. It's very overwhelming. So we want to start thinking about what are some successful routines that are going to help us accomplish this big goal of getting our taxes turned in on time. So opening the mail. Now, your routine might be, I'm going to open it once a week. So I only have to think about my mail once a week. And that's where having all the mail go into one basket makes it much easier for you to be successful about finding the documents you need. And also not stressing about, oh my gosh, where is the mail? I know it's around here somewhere. Did I leave it in the dining room? Did I leave it in my bedroom? So this one basket is a new routine that you might start establishing for yourself. Another routine might be having a regular time to file your paperwork. And I talk about the simplest way to create a filing system because, again, there are no filing system police. Nobody said we have to do this perfectly. I know I'm talking to each of you that, like, we know there is a perfect way to do this, and I want Ellen to tell me that. No. So the perfect way is to just be sure that you have one box. And since it's a new year, the box will be named 2023. And in that box goes everything to do with 2023. Now, if you want a more complicated system, there's lots of information on how to set up a filing system that's a little bit more complicated. But right now, we just need to know there's a place for the things that we need to do our taxes with. And that single file, we'll talk about it in a minute, it's going to be digital or paper. So we have a place to put specifically what comes in for your taxes. And then the other new routine that I want you to think about is shredding and recycling, tossing your unneeded papers, because we all know what is really in that mail after Christmas is a lot of stuff we don't need. It's a lot more fun during Christmas because we got a lot of holiday cards. We saw a lot of cute pictures of families, but now we're kind of back to that regular. We get a lot of things that need to be shredded or recycled. So if you want to start a new routine where you have a mail station, I call it a command center, where all these things come together, that might be reinforcing your routine, setting up the system where the command center is in the place that typically your mail arrives at. And that way you have sections of your command center that are specifically for mail that's incoming. I call that unprocessed. After you go through the mail, there's things that you want to retain for file and taxes. And then there's usually some things that I call resources. They're things that might have come from your kids' school, from the activities you're involved in, your place of worship. So you might have like a resource section. And then the final step I keep is a slot that has to do with paying things, because even though we pay most of our things online, there's still things that come in the mail that we need to pay. So your command center can look like a lot of different things. It can look like wall pockets on a wall. It can look like a small box that has file folders in it. It can even just look like a single inbox, like one tray that everything that is left from your opening of your mail. So you only have to look in one place. So make your command center as attractive as possible, because cute counts. Put it in a place that's easy to access, and then start using your routines to reinforce your command center.
All right. I know that we've already covered a little bit about your taxes folder, but let's talk specifically about taxes.
Absolutely. So this is where we kind of dig deep here about what it is we're really going to be actionable about, the ways we're going to make taxes easier. So I recommend having a tax folder all year long. And so starting it now for 2023 is just as important as having a 2022 folder. So simultaneously, you're going to have two folders that are actionable for the time being. And those folders belong in your command center. But if you don't have a command center established yet, at the very least, have a single box. You could use a magazine sorter. You can even use a shoebox from something you got over the holidays, so that there's a specific spot to place the materials that are coming in for 2022. Now, if you're going the digital route, which is awesome, you also want to create in your inbox a subfolder that says taxes 2022 and taxes 2023, because a lot of things do arrive digitally now. Again, our goal in having this folder is to have one place to place the documentation, so you don't have to stress out where did it go. So in either digital or physical format, just be sure if there's one step you take away from today's presentation, that would be the single thing I would reinforce for you to do for sure. So you want to file those documents as soon as they arrive in either the mail or digitally. So now we have a place to put them, which is really important. And there's different types of documents, and I'm sure that this is very foundational for all of y'all, but I just want to give it a little bit of a highlight. There's some income documents, which for some people, it's very simple. It's a W-2 form. For some people, it's not so simple. It's many 1099s, because we have a lot more people who are working independently as well as working at a full-time job. And then there's deduction documents. You don't need to separate them inside your folder. You just need a collection point right now. So both of them go into the digital or the physical folder. Now, if you're a business owner, you have had lots and lots of receipts coming in all year, and that's often a big challenge. So if you have not taken all those into account and they're spread out, again, you want to pull those all together, bring them back to the digital or the physical folder so that you have them accessible. Again, the foundational organization of this makes this work so much easier. So gathering it all together in one point is very important. If you're a business owner and you have a lot of expenses, hopefully you've recounted them on your credit card. That's another place you can find these things, a credit card statement. So you want to keep all those credit card statements. You have a bit more work to do. And again, consult your professional so that they can help you as a business owner. I know I do most of my work on QuickBooks, and there's been a lot of people who really love QuickBooks. It's not the only way to go. Some people just have these in Excel spreadsheets, but just be thinking, how do I want to capture all these things? So I'm going to talk a little in depth about the income documents, because I want you to be aware of them as they come in, so you know what you're looking for. And this confirms the money you've received all year long. So of course, most people get a W-2, which is the income from a full-time job. Then there's a series of different 1099s. Now, some of the 1099s are from the gig work that you're doing. Some of them are for interest you're receiving and dividends. And then some are for broker handled transactions. So some of those are compiled on a statement you receive from an investment professional. Some of them are from the banks. So you just want to be aware that there are a lot of different income documents you're going to be receiving, and you need to be sure you capture all of them. As much as you receive that document, the government receives that document. So this is often when you don't have one of these pieces in your taxes, you're potentially going to be risking an audit because the government knows that that income is coming in. Now, I can't speak as much about Venmo and Square, but I will say transactions are being received through Venmo and Square. And this year is the first year you will receive a document. And I don't know if it's going to be a 1099. I don't know what that document's going to be since it's new. But I do want you to be aware that it will be recorded with the government as well as you receiving that information. So we just want to be sure we're incorporating that so it's not a flag again that you're adhering to the rules for the IRS. So I know this is where people get stuck too, because the deduction documents are actually a little bit individualized, a little more complicated for people. So these are the documents that reduce the taxes you pay. So sometimes people call them expenses, but they're really officially called deductions. So one of the biggest, and these are mainly the personal documents that you're going to be talking about in our presentation today. So you again want to consult your professional about what are the documents that you need for your business. So for personal taxes, the property taxes are a substantial deduction. Those are the taxes you've paid to the local taxing entities. So I'm in Houston, so I pay to Harris County and also my school district. So I have two different property taxes that I'm looking for. And those are typically paper documents. Mortgage interest, if you have an interest statement, you have a form also. Charitable deductions, these are the things that come from expenses. Charitable deduction receipts, retirement accounts, educational expenses. So as we're thinking about medical bills, these are all different ways that are different deductions that we might be thinking as a professional about what are the deductions that we'll be taking this time. So medical bills might be an expense, and state, local, and sales tax.
We did have a question come in asking if there's a handout. We don't have a particular handout, but we do post the webinar to our website and also to YouTube, and attendees will get a link to the replay of this event. So you're welcome to watch it again, take screenshots and create your own handout. So I'll go ahead and turn the time back over to you, Ellen.
Thanks. Good question, guys. So thank you so much. So online access, again, we're thinking about those 1099s for income and dividend. They're important documents you want to see, which will be, again, referring to our professionals, which the online access for income and dividend are through our folders again. The mortgage interest can come in that way as well. There are sometimes other loans. Again, we want to talk with our professionals about that. What might those be that we want to add to our tax documentation? And we're responsible for the property taxes being paid, but we want to record when are those and what are the amounts. So one of the easiest ways is to use a checklist. And not only many professionals offer checklists, there's checklists online to get organized. But as we're going through this, just be thinking about what's a checklist that might help you from a professional. My accountant sends me a checklist every year that I use in providing the information back to him, which I find extremely valuable. So I'd ask your own professional if they have something like that available. So I'm here to tell you, like, one of the things we always talk about is building a bigger team. Professionals can save you time, they can save you money, they can save you effort. So I want you to think about what are some of the time blocks that you want to set aside that you're going to start working on your taxes. What is that one spot that's going to be your one home for papers for your command center? Be thinking about, are there professionals that not only do you know what your income is, do I want to take the next step with planning how I want to use those funds? What business planning do I need to take? So there's so many opportunities for us to build a bigger team. I just want to think about what are some of the other things that might help you build a bigger team yourself.
All right, we're going to open up some time to take some questions, and I do have a couple to start off with. I will tell our attendees to go ahead and put your additional questions in the chat. So the first question is, can you talk a little bit about setting up a routine to handle starting your taxes? So it'll take several hours and I don't have that much time in a block.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So usually I tell people just start with an hour if you have that amount of time so that you can break things down. And now that you know, maybe your first step is setting up your command center or your spot you're going to be doing this work, creating that 2022 and 2023 box, or even just a digital folder. So if you start with just an hour of time, then you're going to be able to manage your project much better.
All right, here's another question. Can you talk about a little spring cleaning for your paperwork and maybe taking that time while you're doing your taxes to make sure?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for asking that question, because that's something I definitely would love to talk about. This is the perfect time to clean out your file system, because what's in your files is things you wanted to reference for a year. So after the command center, there's filing, and then there's a third section, and I call it archive. And what I do is during tax time, take the things out that pertained to the year that your taxes are, so the previous year, and then assess, like, are these things that I want to keep for a longer duration? So some of those things you don't need to keep for a longer duration, you decide to shred them. But some of those things, like financial information, you might want to keep longer, and as a result, I place file folders in the archive box that have to do with those topics. So some of them are investment, they might be banking, they might be credit card. So the editing of your file system creates more space in your filing to put things in this year if you decide to file a little bit more complexly than just the box. And then you also have the opportunity to retain things you want to keep a little bit longer in an archive area. And then that archive area, again, I want you to refer to your professional, but typically it's every 7 years. After 7 years, you don't need to retain the backup information. But I would talk to your professional because they may give you a different timeline. So in this archive section, which is made up of file boxes, they're bought at big box stores that, they are just a plastic rectangular box that's meant for paper. You can Google it. You might have 7 of those, and then there's a rotation that you want to eliminate, shred what's in the 7th year as you go through this rotation according to your accountant. Now, again, your accountant will tell you how long do I have to keep the original documentation that you send to the IRS. My understanding is you have to keep that forever, but every professional will give you their information. So I would totally refer to your professional about that. Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Can you talk a little bit about handling the overwhelm just as far as headspace goes, not necessarily paperwork?
Yes, I think we have a lot of uncertainty, so we really have to get in a frame of mind of how do we manage daily living right now. Just having good foundational self-care is my first go-to for everybody right now. And that self-care means I sleep, a good number, for me, it's 8 hours a night. So giving yourself a really successful bedtime, giving yourself ample rest is this first step. Second step, proper hydration and nutrition. Like we really need to eat protein. We need to take care of how we move every day, like getting up and doing a little bit of daylight every morning, setting ourselves up with really positive routines that have to do with how we take care of ourselves. Even small things like taking time off, being on vacation, which I'm hoping all of y'all just got back from. So I would say the best first step for handling the uncertainties that we're faced with is taking good care of ourselves.
Here's another question. If you hire an expert such as a professional organizer to help you with your paperwork or help you with kind of this time of year when people are starting to do spring cleaning, especially around the kind of paperwork, can you tell us a little bit about how that process works and what they can help you do?
Absolutely. There is a professional in every way, shape, or form that can help you. So I'm a certified professional organizer, which means I have credentials having passed a test. I have continuing education at our website. That's napo.net. That is my association that I'm a member of, that you would find certified professional organizers. And so the credentials offer you the expertise of knowing this professional knows what papers to keep, how long to keep them, and is an expert at record retention, is what I call it. Now, there's also people that help you with finances. They're called daily money managers. They also have a certification. They might be someone who would successfully help you with doing your taxes. And I will say, part of building a bigger team is not only the expertise, but it's also the trust relationship you have with the person who's working with you. Everything is confidential. I know that my clients feel very, sometimes they feel ashamed that this has been so overwhelming and difficult for them, and they need someone to come in and just not only have knowledge, but just walk alongside them and say, hey, we can do this together.
When you work with a client that maybe has an office full of papers in typically how long does that take
Well, we
to
pace
get them
ourselves.
organized? Yeah.
So it really depends. I mean, a lot of times, because you're working in partnership, things go way more quickly than you might think. Typically, when I work with people, I go through the process that I shared with you today. We set up something about the actionable papers first, which has to do with the command center and going through papers that are throughout the space. Then we move to the filing system, which is basically record retention. And we talk about like what's going to work best for them. For some people, they don't want their things in a file cabinet. They want them in a notebook. They want them more visual. They want them in a magazine sorter, things like that. So there's lots of options, and we really suit the success to the way the person thinks about the paper in the best way that they can handle the paper. So in a more manageable way. And then we set up their archive section. So it really depends on, how much paper the backlog is. But sometimes we do what I call a treasure hunt. So we're looking for important papers, and that
Guilty. I'm sorry. I just have to say guilty myself. I have had to go on treasure hunts before. They're not fun.
No. So, it really depends. But I will say it's much more manageable with a partner, and it does alleviate a lot of stress when you're working with a trusted professional.
All right. This is a great kind of follow-up question to that answer. Can you talk about, once you've got it organized, maintaining those systems? Can you give us some tips about maintaining?
Absolutely. I think the maintenance part is the most important. It is the most difficult. I think there's lots of ways for us to be able to maintain something that we thought was unmanageable. First of all, if your system is set up the way you think, it's so much easier to maintain it as a result. So when you're very visual, if you have things where you see them, when you realize things are getting overwhelming and out of hand, it motivates you to, oh, I want to keep my system going. I invested in this system. So there's an emotional and accountability part to that. Routines, of course, come into play. And that's very important to discuss with your professional, like what are routines that work well for you already and how come they work well? So once you know that routines exist in your life, and sometimes it's setting up an appointment with yourself, just like appointments you have with other people. Sometimes it's finding what I call a clutter buddy or a paper partner. Like recently I worked with a family, and of course the husband and wife, they're empty nesters. They were feeling like, oh, I hate paper. Both of us hate paper. I think my wife should do the paperwork. And the husband's like, I think my husband should do the paperwork. Well, guess what? They're doing it together. They both equally hate it. And so as a result, they're accountable to each other. They're doing it on a day of the week that doesn't interfere with their lifestyle. So we chose that day intentionally because they do a lot of travel. So that travel meant, they're not there on Saturday, and they have the opportunity to do this on Wednesday. So why not? Let's just do it every Wednesday. And that way they also, things come in everyone's mail that you do have to make some decisions about. Like sometimes it's even things like home maintenance. Do we need to do some work around our house? Oh, look, here's a coupon for this kind of work. Do we want to act on that? Do we want to call that person? So some things that trickle out from mail are tasks as well. So what I would say with routines, set up a system that works well for you, match the routines that are already working well for you, and then finally give yourself a reward, because hello, you just did something really hard for yourself. And that reward can look like a lot of things. For me, a beautiful day and taking a walk, that is like the best reward ever. But for you, it might be reading one of those magazines that just came out of the mail that I never have time to read. It could be, we're just going to go get a treat. We're running to whatever, Starbucks or wherever. So think about how routines are much more a part of our lives than we might imagine, and why they're important.
All right, and then we have time for one final question. I do want to say we did get a comment about some headspace ideas, like addressing anxiety by getting a coach or a therapist. I like that. Goes into that build a better team kind
Bigger
of.
team. Mm-hmm.
Yep, bigger team. Yep. Here's the last question that we have time for today. So many of our records now are digital. Can you talk a little bit about organizing your digital paperwork?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are really similar ways to organize your digital paperwork to the paper organizing too. So it's the same concept. What we want to do is create a home, a spot specifically for the different information that you're receiving. But I want to caution you because, again, we're kind of drawn to complexity. So we think every single individual digital record should have its own individual spot. No, I want you to think big categories. So if you're going to be keeping, let's say all your utilities come back with a confirmation, and you want to keep that because you want to know, hey, I paid it last week. I don't want to pay it a second time. So all you want is one big slot for utilities. You don't need one for gas. You don't need one for electric. You don't need one for water. Or you might want to categorize it by, here's everything that I paid in January. Here's everything I paid in February. So think about what the big category is for you. Create that slot in either your documents or your inbox subfolders, depending on where you want to place that. Like, it's not necessary. Like, I'm a big believer in when it comes in an email and it's a document, it belongs in my documents. But if it's just a confirmation, I just need to keep it in a subfolder of my inbox that says, hey, I can grab those there. So just have an intended spot and create that ahead of time so that it's ready to receive the document when it comes in.
Well, thank you so much. This has been very informative, and I hope, excuse me, I hope it's helped everyone kind of get some ideas about how to start off their journey and getting these paperwork and taxes ready.
Well, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. It's a really hard and not very fun topic, but being with Marche made it a lot more fun today.
Well, I want to remind our attendees to look for an email soon with a link to the replay of this event. And you're welcome to share that replay with your friends and family. Again, we want to thank our speaker and the organization that we have worked with to bring you this webinar today. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.